missed the introduction and my dulcet tones, so that's not too bad. But welcome to today's webinar. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Raylene Hobson from the Oil Search Limited. So welcome, Raylene.
Hi, Penny. Pleased to be with you today.
Oh, fantastic. I'm really looking forward to getting into your story. But as normal, let me go through those little housekeeping issues. So first thing is, everybody on the line, you are actually in listen-only mode today. So that does not mean, though, that you cannot participate. On the right-hand side, in the actual GoToWebinar panel, you'll actually see the ability to ask questions. So if at any time you have a question, please type it in there, and we have a team with us in the room that can actually put those questions through to us, so we make sure we get to answer as many of those as possible. Now, I will apologise up front. There are a lot of times where we don't actually get to answer every single question that comes through. If that is the case, we work with Raylene post the actual webinar to get the answers to those and make sure that we get those answers back to you. So please, if we miss yours, it's not by choice, it's by keeping to the time frame, which today we will do. We will be about 50 to 55 minutes for the actual webinar, so we keep within the hour that you've allotted in your busy day to attend today's webinar. The other question that always does get asked is, yes, we are recording today's webinar. So what will happen is approximately 2 working days post today, you will receive an email from us, and that will include a link through to the recording of the webinar. So you can watch and listen at your own leisure, or you can share that with your peers or your network. So yes, definitely, we will be recording today's session. All right, well, that's enough about the actual housekeeping and such. Let's get into today. So today, as you're aware, is all about leadership frameworks, and what we're attempting to achieve for you today is for you to get a great understanding of how organisations that are going through maybe a growth phase or something similar to those types of organisational change patterns can actually use a leadership framework to assist them in that process, as well as underpinning the success of your future leaders. And I know that everybody is actually keen to actually see how their actual future leaders, and they can predict those, do succession planning around those and such. So we're going to get deep into that. But before we do get deep in there, let's have a little bit about Oil Search. So Raylene, sick of my tones now, let's get to you. Can you tell us a little bit about Oil Search Limited, please?
I sure can. So Oil Search is a bit of an unusual company. So we're actually, the head office is based in Papua New Guinea, but we're listed on both the PNG and the Australian Stock Exchange. And it's grown from a very small company into a much larger company. So we've been going through growth for quite a while, and we see that, continuing over the next 5 years. We've just released our next 5-year strategy, and the vision that we've got for our company is to continue to be a top quartile return for shareholders. So for a small company, we're frequently in the top 20 shareholders on the ASX stock exchange for return to shareholders. So very good company from that perspective. We're PNG's largest oil producer, and we've recently we partnered with ExxonMobil and are now working with them to deliver on the PNG LNG project, and now we're delivering oil and gas. We also have interests over in Tunisia and Kurdistan, so we're in all the fun places.
Yes.
And we've got about over 1,000 employees, and they range from high calibre professionals. We've got a couple of people with PhDs. In fact, I think we've got 1 or 2 with 2 PhDs. So very high calibre professionals, through to people out in our production in the oil fields who are bus drivers and people just operating the plant. So quite a range.
So the word diversity for your organisation sort of means everything, doesn't it? Diversity of locations,
yes.
Diversity of your people, diversity of roles.
Yeah.
So that creates, I suspect, a number of challenges. So I can see why an organisation like Oil Search should be interested in something like a leadership framework to help you through that. So let's actually have a look at why you then did put in a leadership framework. So why did that come to the forefront?
So when I came into the company, that was about 18 months ago, we were looking at expanding. So they were in the project phase of producing the gas plant for the PNG LNG project. That's a $19 billion project with ExxonMobil. And
just
so,
a little one, huh?
Exactly, just a little one. And so the company realised that, you know, whilst we were taking part in that project, there's actually going to be a significant income coming into the organisation for that. And what that means is, as an organisation, when you get those increases or substantive increases in revenue, you then have to continue to grow or divest and give all of the money back to the shareholders. So generally speaking, most organisations will look at a growth strategy as well as providing income or dividend growth for the shareholders. So they knew they were going to expand, and we also had some increase or our exploration. We were getting some positive results from our Kurdistan oil operations. They're still, you know, being decided, but you know, there's definitely indications there that might expand. Right. So the company identified it was going through an expansion phase, and realised that the current that we're going to have to expand the organisation. So how are we going to make sure that we have the right people in the right roles through that expansion? Now the other side of it was that we were going from oil producers to oil and gas, and that creates different competencies and capabilities in people. And so whilst oil, you can, you know, stop the plant, whilst that's not a good thing, when you change over to gas, what you actually have to do is you have to provide a steady stream of gas. And so we had to go from that ability to just be able to stop things. We have to really focus on reliability, because we get penalised if the gas flow stops going through to that LNG plant. Yes. So really critical change in how we operate our plant and equipment. And so we have to make sure that we've got leaders who are, you know, looking for different things. So for us, what we identified was that whilst we've been successful in the past, the company was going to substantively change. And we needed to have leaders that could push that change through. And so what we wanted to do was be able to, first of all, identify those leaders, and then develop them so that they were able to deliver those results in the future.
Okay, so it's about investing in your own people as well there, by the sounds of it. So a lot of organisations can say, okay, we're going through growth, so let's just bring new people in that you actually saw, well, that might be part of your strategy, but we also want to develop our people, and anyone we do bring in as well, make sure that we're developing them in the right rein of where we're going for our future success.
Yeah, that's right. So I think sometimes if you've got a pervasive culture, and we've got, you know, lots of people who've been with the business and seen it grow, and that's fantastic, but we wanted to bring people in that were going to be able to take us into that next phase of growth.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm sure everyone on the line is thinking, yeah, we've got some of those challenges, or we're seeing those sorts of things. So we're actually going to kick off a poll now, and that poll should be coming up on your screen very shortly. And what we're going to ask you there is, what are the most pressing issues that you see something like a leadership framework actually supporting for you? So the answers there are multi-choice, so you don't have to select just one of these guys. You know, if there is a leadership pipeline issue that you want to address, or you have a challenge around that, if you're going through organisational growth or similar strategies, you need to be able to measure success. Cultural change, all of us are at some time, and you know, it's exciting what Oil Search is going through there with, you know, cultures like PNG, and then going to Kazakhstan and Australia, and all they're very different, diverse cultures. Or it might be just that you wanted to actually push out your HR practices. You're just revisiting those and such. So while we're going through everyone putting in their multi-choice answers there, a couple of questions have actually come through. So the first one is, great one. How many in your team did you have working on the project? So yeah, you're an organisation of around 1,000 people, but I'm sure they're not all in HR.
No, I would like to say I had about 3 or 4 people working on that with me and pushing it through, but it's a very slim team. We have a very slim corporate organisation at Oil Search, and so it was me on my lonesome. So I have to say I was very thankful to have Alison and the team from PageUp people who were able to help work with me on that. And I also set up a bit of a working party as well to help. So, you know, we had volunteers, or not volunteers, they were conscripted to help us with the project.
Okay, so it was bringing the business in, so it wasn't just a HR project as well then, by the sounds of it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So one of the key things I've learnt, I think, in rolling out anything in an organisation is you've got to get buy-in, and so getting people on board from the business. And so I asked for representatives of people that they wanted to give development opportunities to. So I took one person from each of our business units or divisions, and so I had those people, and they became the working party.
Oh, great. So you then had a combination of business knowledge with experts from PageUp around the leadership framework, working with you, who's an expert in both.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to close that poll off then. Thank you very much. I think that was a great question too. And let's have a look at those actual results. Just waiting for those to come up for us. Just be one moment longer. There we go. So it actually looks like most people are around the leadership pipeline, but as I thought, that cultural change one's right up there too, really. A lot of organisations there too, still though, going through organisational growth or similar strategies. Yeah, so looks like there's a great combination there of different. So yeah, so it looks like you're not on your lonesome out there going through this.
No, there's been some recent research, and leadership pipeline is one of the key issues that people in all organisations continue to have. And look, it's going to be an ongoing issue because there's always churn in an organisation. So, you know, finding where the next great leader comes from is always going to be a key thing, I think, for businesses, because they understand how critical it is to have the right people in leadership roles.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll close that poll right off now and get into why. So, yeah, we've had a bit about what and the journey to get there, but why an actual, what type of leadership framework? So what does it look like? What have you built into that? How is that actually, because there's a lot of differences in people's minds around what a leadership framework might actually be. So for you, what was that?
So for me, the key thing is in organisations, there's often a behavioural framework or there's values, and I think that they're fantastic, and you know, it gives people something to focus on. But the key thing is it looks different at different levels of the organisation. For example, you know, understanding what accountable looks like for an executive as opposed to someone who's a bus driver is a very different kettle of fish. So for me, what I wanted from a leadership framework was something that was based on, you know, from a theoretical point of view, the Sharan and Girotta pipeline, the leadership pipeline, and we also had done some work with our leadership levels that brought in the work of Elliot Jarks and the requisite organisation. So for me, I wanted to have a framework that could reflect the different levels of the organisation, but it also needed to be reasonably simplistic. So the key thing around people, you know, and how we use and apply a leadership framework is making sure that it's not too big. People need to be able to remember it. Cognitive load theory, I'm very big on 5 plus or minus 2. You don't want to be giving people too many things to remember. So, so for me, it was around the pipeline. So we ended up getting a leadership framework that identified, you know, looked at what have we done in the past that's made us successful, and we see that we want that continuing. We didn't want to lose what had made the organisation successful, because it's been quite entrepreneurial and achieved feats that, you know, a lot of the larger businesses haven't been able to do. So we wanted to make sure we kept that, but at the same time we also wanted to make sure we were, you know, looking at that future focus and saying, well, you know, we need to be much more reliable, and we've got to be able to to change the way we do some of our things, and so we wanted to be able to capture what we needed in the future. So we ended up with 6 competencies, and that framework, so 6 competencies, but that was we've also levelled that framework out to 5 levels. So that goes from the base level employees, which is obviously all employees, right through to the executive. And we're currently using that framework in all aspects of the employee life cycle, so from recruitment, assessment, performance management and development.
Okay, so what you've then got is a framework that's going across, you said they're the whole employee life cycle, and all levels, so a great investment then from an organisational perspective. So the business, how did they like the idea of a framework that could cover all of those aspects?
I think it's an interesting thing. I've seen them work in other organisations and have used them and seen the value of them, but I think it's one of those things you've got to actually apply it and use it so that they can see the value. And we've now rolled the framework out and had some experience in using it in our high potential program, and got a fantastic endorsement from the executive, and we've taken that to the board, and they were extremely impressed as well. So I think it all comes down to the proof's in the pudding.
Yes.
When you can demonstrate how you can use that to get value. And I think one of the key things in HR that we struggle with is being able to implement measures so that we can demonstrate success and return on investment. And having a really clear framework is very helpful from that perspective.
Okay. So that was part of the upfront work you did then, was to go, I'm not going to bring in this great tool if we're not going to be able to measure it and actually prove back to the business that we are actually adding value?
Yeah, that's right. So it's really around getting that business buy-in. And, we also needed to make sure that we integrated safety. So safety is a very high-risk industry, the oil and gas industry. And so we wanted to make sure we had something that had, safety all through it, so it's quite pervasive. And the other reason we use it is because we do have language differences and we have cultural differences, just having a framework that says this is what this behaviour means. We've got people who now they just point to something on the page and say, you're doing this or you're not doing that, because it may sometimes be a language issue, or sometimes that they're not experienced in being able to articulate what it is about their particular behaviour that they're not sure about. So they read it in the framework and they go, oh, okay, it's this. So it does help in terms of giving really good feedback. And, there's a whole lot of research around, the value in improving performance comes with being able to give specific feedback. And that's one of the key things that I see in terms of being able to help leaders. That's one of the benefits you get from a framework.
Oh, fantastic. So you've been kind enough to actually share with us the high-level framework. So, and I apologise, everyone, it might look very small on your screen and such, but I'll get Raylee just to take us through. Here is the 6 competencies, here are the 5 levels. Can you tell us just a little bit more about how this is actually working for you and how some of these actually came about? So,
yeah, it was really interesting actually, because trying to distill down the culture of an organisation that you currently have and one that you want in future to 6 behaviours is a really difficult thing. But I think the key thing is understanding where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Right. And so in identifying this, I think, and in any framework, I think you have to understand that there are going to be things that are missed out. And it's not that they're not valid, it's just that you've really, to get people focused on things, they can't afford to be focusing on too many things. So for me, the key thing was having the iconography, so having the graphics available. But in terms of what the actual labels were, that was highly interesting, and we had an executive that debated the words that were in there. One of the big ones was resourceful. So we were saying, one of the things that's made Oil Search successful is that it's entrepreneurial. We have people in our organisation that are real go-getters, and if they see a problem, they'll fix it, which is fantastic, and people have these very broad jobs in oil search because it's lean, but the value in having these broad jobs is you get to dip your finger in a whole lot of different pies. So it's very rewarding for people. They enjoy that type of thing. But now we're going into this gas delivery. You've got people out in the production saying, I don't want my frontline staff being entrepreneurial. If there's a procedure, we have to follow it. So we had to work out, well, how do we incorporate a word that means, we want you to think of how you can do things better, but we don't want you to go out and, change the world. Yeah. And so there was lots of debates, and resourceful was the outcome. So I think part of getting the engagement with the executive was really putting this to them and saying, well, this is your framework. These are the leaders for your organisation. What do you want? And I think that robust debate at the executive level was one of the the key benefits of the framework that we have, is that they're really tied into it. They're all very familiar with it and can talk to it themselves and can articulate it to their team.
So I think it's really interesting that there was debate, and I think that debate in these sorts of activities is critical for the success, because that to me straight away shows he's really bought into this. He really knows that this is an important project, it's an important factor, and it's going to drive success in his business. So he wanted it to actually be reflective. So, and I think that's congratulations to you in bringing the business in, and for them to get that entwined in the actual project. To me, that shows ownership.
And I think part of that was getting them in up front. So, I asked the executive if they wanted to be included in the tender process and in selecting the providers. And so we have providers coming in presenting not just to me, but to members of the executive. So I think that got a lot of buy-in at the start as well.
Oh, fantastic. So quite frightening for the providers walking into a group of executives and such, but yeah, great, because they actually have got total buy-in from the very beginning.
That's right.
Magnificent. So how? I'm sure that's in everybody's mind. And we have talked a little bit there about the executive support, but I know you did a lot more with when you were building out the framework and then working into the implementation phase. So can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the executive support, we had them in at the tender process, so they were brought in from that perspective. We also worked with PageUp, and PageUp went out and met with all of the executives to learn, what they thought the business, what made it successful and where it was going. There was a lot of research in, where the company was going strategically and what might be successful from that perspective. We also, as I mentioned, I had established a working party where we had representatives from every division or business unit in the company, and they were, when we had a kickstart workshop, so got them involved, told them what it was about and what were going to be the implications of that in terms of time commitment, and really talked to them that they were going to be the change champions for their business unit, and so there were some responsibilities with that, and so people could opt out if they wanted to, but they all decided that they wanted to join in, and it was a great cross-functional group as well. We also did a number of things, so we would pilot. So we went out to various areas in PNG. So we had the PageUp people came with us and took the flight to our remote locations, and got to suffer some of the the camp life, where very rigid the camps that we have up in the highlands in PNG. So we ran a number of pilots where we were getting feedback from the PNG nationals and the people who are actually working up there to say, how does this work? Is that, do you think that that's possible? But also being mindful that they're responsible, and what they were looking at is we were asking them from a language perspective. Did it translate correctly? Did it sound right? And we changed some of the language, just because some of the terminology they said, oh, well, that's not quite right. So we changed some of that based on feedback. And I think the pilot activity was really good because it got people to see what some of the materials were going to be. So we already got an indication at that time that, they were really liked the development guides that, were going to come out, and they said, oh, this is fantastic, when's this coming? And so in doing, a pilot and focus groups, we, raised awareness and interest in the product.
Right. So it actually became, we talked at the beginning about involving the executive team at the beginning so that gets you buy-in and such. Your working group then helped you actually increase that buy-in across. Now you've even gone to another level of buy-in by touching with your pilot groups and soliciting feedback and such. So it almost becomes a whole organisational job or project rather than just HR, Raylea all on her own as the one person. So that question at the very beginning about how big was your team actually grew quite substantially throughout.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing, getting involvement, all levels, all different types of workers, and making sure that it met what they thought, provided something that they thought might be useful. And then we ran a pilot for our high potential program. So we implemented a high potential program using this as the assessment base, and also in terms of introducing it to those high potentials, and got them to then create development plans based on this new leadership framework. And that was enormously successful as well.
Okay. So how many approximately did you have go through your first?
So we had 11, and we had just, so it's only a very small cohort, and we had them from a variety of levels in the organisation.
So that gives you a really good indicator of the success also of how that framework will work for you because of that small subject size, so you get a lot of feedback as well as diversity across the business.
Yeah, and so they used some of the materials, for example, the development guides that we created. We then, provided those to the participants to say, well, use this when you're coming up with your development plan. And so, we were already applying the things that we'd created, and we're getting feedback from them on, how did you find this? Was it useful? And I think that was a really good gauge as to whether there was, value in what we were doing.
Yeah. Well, if they can give you feedback, it means they're using it. So that's always a fear, isn't it? You build all these great tools and such to support your framework, and then everyone goes, yeah, that's great in theory, guys, but we haven't got time for that. They obviously saw the value in it.
Yeah.
So that's magnificent. Okay, so what we might do now is just quickly jump back out to the audience and another poll and ask you, when is your organisation reviewing or implementing a leadership framework? So again, with this one, it is actually I believe it's a multi-choice, so from memory. But yeah, we'd love to hear whether you've already commenced the journey, so you're like Raylea and have moved along there, or that you're thinking about it in the next 6 to 12 or maybe even longer than that. For some of you it may be, we're here to hear today about this to see whether this is something that we'd like to investigate. So at the moment it's really unknown. Have we done enough research? Obviously you've done, Raylea, to go, is this something we need to do? Or no, it's actually not on our current agenda. We've got a lot of other things, but we really know that this is something that's important. And as you said, the research out there is telling us that, in particular, leadership pipelines is a critical business issue. And I do know that there's been some research, I believe it was from Aberdeen, saying it's actually a $40 trillion issue in regards to leadership succession. So now we have had one or two more questions come in, so we might just pop one in here. Now, you did say that you're actually piloting it through your actual leadership program, but are you using the framework at any other levels of your organisation?
So we are currently, we're developing success profiles for all of the critical roles that have been identified from a succession planning perspective. We've also used it for the recruitment for our graduate program.
Wow.
And yeah, we're using it. So we're using it for recruitment also for our senior executives. So it's been very well used from a recruitment perspective, and also for the development. If we look at our graduates, we've based our graduate program development around the framework. So we do 2 residentials a year where we pull people in, and we've based that around the 6 leadership behaviours.
Okay, so you're getting more bang for your buck by being able to apply it across different levels there. So that's fantastic. Well, we might close the poll up. I think everyone's had an opportunity to do their voting, and let's have a look and see where people are in that actual journey. A lot have actually started it, which is amazing. So that's fantastic, everybody. I'm glad hopefully what today's doing is either giving you some empathy because you're going through the same, or some new tips and such. And it also looks like then others were looking at that it was a little bit further down the track for them, so today might be part of their research and investigation into that space. So let's keep moving then in the interest of time. So change. Now I know we have talked a little bit throughout about the change processes and such that you have implemented, and the fact that you've engaged the whole business in, or it feels like the whole business in the project. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of the things or the key things that you feel make change successful for you in this project?
So I think obviously the key is around communication and making sure you're targeting your communication to the relevant stakeholders. So, you know, being clear on, first of all, who are your stakeholders and what do they need to get out of the process. So I do stakeholder maps and identify, you know, for each of these groups, what do I want them to know before we launch, during and after. And that helps in terms of targeting what the communication objectives are and what might be the best medium. So for example, with the executives, I'm not going to be sending them lots of detailed messages. Our execs are enormously busy there. So it's got to be short and sharp, and it's got to have clear actions and outcomes. You know, if I need something done, make sure that you get that in there. So I think understanding who the stakeholders are and what type of communication medium works best for them. So I did a lot of going around one-on-one with each of the executives.
Wow.
And just having, you know, stepping them through things. And, you know, that takes a lot of time, but I think the engagement's worth it from that perspective. So then also looking at, you know, who are your stakeholders? Who are the people who are going to be asked questions about this? So obviously we need to make sure that our HR team, so we've gone and done briefings with each of the business unit HR people and said to them, look, this framework's going to be coming out, you might get asked questions, and so we've given them tips and tricks, you know, frequently asked questions that they might have. So looking at different stakeholder groups and thinking, well, you know, what might happen with that particular group? So I think understanding the communication, so what are the objectives of the communication, what's the best medium, and also making sure that you're doing in a method that's appropriate for those people.
And that can be difficult, can't it? Because you've got to think about, you may have a defined group, but they may all have different needs around communication. But always, we talk about it a lot, and it always comes up in every one of our webinars. You know, when we get to the change piece, everyone says, yeah, communication is important, but what you've done there is, you know, really got into the depth of that to actually go, what channels actually work for each of those.
Yeah, and so I think, look, if you think, so I use the ProSci methodology, the change methodology, and it's really clear on, you know, what are you trying to achieve? Is it awareness? If it's awareness, then you have different communication methods. So you might do something fun, or, you know, something that's a little bit bold to raise awareness, or if it's, but if you want action, or if you want them to learn something and change the way they're doing things, then that's when you're implementing some sort of training, or you're getting them to engage a little bit more with the content. So you have to be really clear on what you want as the outcome so that you can then design it based on that. And so having a structured process around how you're going to do the change, and having a change team. So, for example, our working party, we were really clear on, okay, well, now you need to go back to your groups and you need to communicate that. And I think one of the big things that, the big lessons I always tell people about is you actually cannot be too overt. So if you have a working party and they're on the working party, you know, they'll come in and they're really engaged, they understand that. But if you don't say to them, you need to go back to your team and you need to, at the next meeting, make sure that you talk about this, sometimes people just forget that and it's like, oh, you know, I thought you'd gone back and communicated that to your team, but you actually have to, you know, make sure that you're overt and state those types of things, because otherwise people just get caught up in it and they're very happy that they know everything, but the rest of the business is left behind. So I think understanding and making sure you change champions, the people that you're using in the business, and you know, look for linchpin people, the ones that are going to bring those on board, identify those early, and you know, start sending them out information early helps.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so we've seen it change. So what has really worked well for you? It looks like quite a bit, and we have talked, I think, touched on some of these components already. But in your eyes and the business's eyes, what has actually worked?
Yeah, look, I think the process that we went through in terms of engaging with the executive and getting them involved in the selection process, really, you know, from the very early on, they were engaged with PageUp and certainly engaged with the process and understood the benefits, because you know, you've got professionals doing the sales to say this is going to be the value to your business, and there's research, and so the executive could then sort of engage a little bit more with understanding the benefits. And then I think getting the working party involved, we got a lot of really good feedback on certain things that would or wouldn't work. You know, there might have been some history associated with some language or history associated with pictures that we were using. And so, you know, making sure that you know, you had other people looking at it. And certainly I'm not a big, anyone who's worked with me will know that I'm not great on detail, so having other people doing the spell checks and the, you know, check for clarity in terms of that is really quite useful. So having a working party that's diverse and also, you know, across all of the geographies and different levels in the organisation was useful.
So just on that, so I'm going to stop you because I know you looked like you were on a roll there.
I was.
And he's going to jump in, because you mentioned earlier that with the working group, you saw that also as an opportunity for development for them as individuals. So has there been any, you know, feedback at all around, yeah, you know, these people actually feel more empowered in their roles, or they do feel that they've actually come out of it with a learning experience or development experience as well?
Well, we've had, look, a number of the younger people that were engaged on the working party have certainly, you know, appreciated, you know, the whole process. So, for example, that project management process, understanding how they needed to go back and influence people within the business unit, and you know, in having conversations with them, they said that that's been really a really useful thing for them. So I think we don't have, well, we haven't got a lot of experience in terms of doing big organisation project planning and rolling that out and getting people engaged, for example, for the frontline in PG. So they really valued the project management side of things and that concept of influencing other people.
Great. So, yeah, obviously some great development has happened there as well. So, sorry, I'll let you keep going there then, but it was just something that had clicked in my mind.
Yes. So the other side of it is the graphic design. So 80% of, you know, any audience is going to be visual. So you've really got to be able to convey the message and have it appealing, new, fresh, something different. And so get a graphic designer in and do some really cool stuff. So have you got a, you know, posters around the business? Have you got, you know, T-shirts with the leadership framework? Or, you know, what is it that's going to really, you want to be seeing the graphics and have people being able to relate to that purely as a reminder, if nothing else, you know, oh, maybe I should be accountable today, or I should be resourceful, you know, I haven't done that today. But yeah, you really, to get permeation across an organisation, you can't just have words. Most people, you know, email's one of those things where, you know, everyone gets a million emails and they're overloaded with information. So a really great way to capture that is through visuals. So I would encourage if you're doing this, get a graphic designer to do the concepts and pull something together that's really good.
Great. So I'll get you to keep going next.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're ready for it.
So the other side of it, obviously in using the graphic design and the working party, they were my marketers out in the business, so they were going out and showing people things and getting ideas and getting feedback. So it's a bit of a marketing plan about who are the customers and how might they use it. So making sure that you've done a little bit around marketing what your product is. So it might be making sure that you're doing broadcasts where you're saying this is coming up, or we've got this coming out. Doing it in a number of different channels. So if you've got a what do you call it, a newspaper or a magazine, a corporate magazine, and one of the things that we haven't done this yet, but I am actually going up to PNG for this specific purpose in January, is to get people telling us how they've applied it in the business. So we're just going to do something like those vox pops where people come in and can tell us. So I'm looking forward to that. So have a bit of a marketing plan about not just how you can launch it, but how do you continually reinforce it and keep it and invigorate it, because the launch is really just the start of the journey.
Yeah, well, you said it's about the whole employee lifestyle, so how do you keep it living?
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing is that you want to be getting in leaders and your supervisors, we want them recruiting people into the business that match these new behaviours. So really getting them to understand not just the words, but also understand the detail in the framework. So you've got to get them engaging with it. So you've got to provide them things at the right time that they can use. So the other thing that worked, as I said, was our talent program.
Yeah.
And so the talent program, we have done some really serious assessments, the poor things for guinea pigs. But that's based around, as I said, I really like to make sure that I've got good measures. Yep. And so we're going to do pre and post measures. So they're doing development over a year where they've been, some of them have been given coaches, some of them have been given extra projects. And that's all based on the assessments that identified, where the development area was, and that was all based on our leadership framework. So that's been very useful, as I said, and we're also now doing assessments across the business, particularly in our PNG business unit, and we are assessing them based on the success profiles that were established in that talent program. So now we're really quite confident we're going to get a consistent and a really clear measure of, okay, what is our bench strength? And it's going to be valid, it's going to be based on, so really excited about that, yeah. We've also, Oil Search, apart from being, a growing organisation, is a socially responsible organisation, and we have a health foundation up in PNG, and we do things like in the communities that we work in, we provide malaria and AIDS medication. We have frequently, we're delivering babies in our clinics. So it's a fantastic organisation, and so just as an example is we've recently got a new CEO because we're actually going to expand that our health foundation and probably start to include education. So there's a bit of work on what we're going to be doing with that. But so we did CEO recruiting for that, and we were using our leadership framework to recruit and to assess those candidates for our CEO of the Health Foundation.
Wow, so even more diversity with your leadership framework. You really are getting value for money out of that, I think, by the sounds of it. So what have been the lessons learned?
Look, there's probably a couple of things. So we have recently launched a new strategy, and so the leadership framework obviously is going to be key moving forward to the business. And our managing director, and look, I completely understand this, but he wanted to link it to the strategy because this is part of the foundation of that strategy. So we're going to have these strategic initiatives, which is the what, and the leadership, which is, this is how we're going to be doing that. So, so we've held back on launching that, doing the big launch. We held it back. We had it ready to go in March last year. We could have had out a lot more detail. So out with a lot more and got a lot more traction more quickly. So I think you probably just need to, you know, if in hindsight, maybe I would have done it a little bit later if I'd have known that we were going to tie it to this strategic review, rather than, you know, going out all guns blazing. And, you know, we had lots of buy-in, and there was a little bit of fall off when we didn't do anything for a while we were waiting for this strategic review. So, you know, you get all this momentum and then we couldn't launch it. So that was a little frustrating. Yeah. So I think being clear on, you know, if there's any other things that you might need to tie it to and what are the chances that that might get held up. And so I would just make sure that if you've got that momentum, you want to go with it. I think the other side of it would be, I've got reinforcement of the behaviours. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it's probably, I'm guessing, making sure we're clear around what the action is, not just for the launch, but for the follow-up. Yeah. So Oil Search, as I said, is we're skinny on the ground. Yep. And so taking people out for training is, you know, that's not really going to happen. So I think in terms of the reinforcement, we're looking at doing activities such as we've got recognition cards, and we're having some competitions and things like that. And so the problem with that is with the reinforcement, given our diverse workforce, you know, they're not really, what works over in PNG often is a phone card, and over in our Kurdistan operations, you know, they've got different requirements for what might be useful, but, you know, if you come up back to Australia, so there's different, if we're going to do competitions or rewards to reinforce people using the behaviours, they're very different in all different parts of the organisation. So you've got different managers wanting to have try different things. So I think trying to corral all of that so that it's useful, and you don't want one part of the organisation, you know, giving $50 phone vouchers and another one giving a hat or something, which is not the same value. So trying to maintain that consistency, but also accommodating the cultural and geographical diversity is difficult.
Beautiful. Well, we have been inundated with questions, and we've got a few minutes left. So let's see how many of these we can actually get through. So the first one there is about how a leadership framework can be transparent to all employees. So most people, if you're a HR practitioner, will know that succession planning can and needs to be in a lot of instances quite confidential. So how are you getting the mix there of using that leadership framework and being transparent, but then also being confidential? It's almost like this.
Yeah, and look, Oil Search is one of those companies where we, you know, we're quite a flat organisation, so that leadership pipeline and the question about who's going to step up is still maintained and kept confidential. So what we, you know, we're quite happy to say you've been targeted as a you've been identified as having potential to move to the next level. But one of the briefings that we covered was that, look, you know, you're obviously a good performer. We're going to put you on this development program, but it doesn't guarantee that, you know, that means you're going to move up to the next level. So what we talk about is what we're doing is we're giving you development to prepare you. So if something comes up and is made available, then you'll have a really good chance to step into that. You know, you'll have a good opportunity to put your best foot forward if we've already done some development with you. So we certainly don't communicate, you know, we've targeted you for the next general manager role, or we've targeted you for a production manager role. What we talk to them about is, you know, identifying that they're high potential, and we'd like to develop them to see, you know, to prepare them in case some positions become available.
Yeah. So you've actually been quite pragmatic, and I know most organisations, that was a great question, because I think a lot of people do find, how do I get around that tension? And I think it's important to be able to actually, you know, do that change between, okay, we need to be very clear and transparent, but we also need to have some confidentiality. So congratulations on being able to achieve that.
So can you achieve the same outcome without having a provider to facilitate the process? Wow, that's a great question. Look, I think you know, everything depends on what your situation is. I think there's lots of examples of frameworks available. It just depends on, you know, how much do you want to how much do you need it to identify your future success. So if you relate it, for example, if you pick up an existing framework, how do you know that those particular behaviours are going to be relevant to the success of your business in the future? So I suppose the problem is if you pick up an existing framework and try to apply that to your business, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get leaders who are right for what is going to make your company successful in the future. For example, if we are in the oil and gas business, and there's a lot of, you know, organisations in the oil and gas business, you know, you've got Shell and Exxon, very different cultures. So, you know, we have people who we've brought in from Exxon and they just go, wow, you know, big culture shock, because they're enormous, they're very structured and processed. So if we used their framework, it would be completely different. So, you know, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve, and I think it depends on, you know, basically, it's not just the framework, it's also how you use it as a business. So I think it really depends on those things.
And what I heard from you earlier too was that ability to engage across the business. Your ability to do that and penetrate across your business is because you broaden from one person being involved in the process. So bringing in the team from PageUp obviously helped you, gave you more legs to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So we've got another one here that's around if you're able to explain a little bit about the tool that assesses capability of the managers and such against the competency. So are you, I think what this question is asking, are you using certified assessment tools, the behavioural questions? Yeah.
So we're working with some providers who can assess their psychologists, and they've established those tools for us. There's also a lot of tools out there as well that you can get you can do some assessments on. But you know, for me, the measurement's the key thing, and it's certainly that's the thing that has actually got me a lot of brownie points, I suppose, with the executive and the board. And so I spent a lot of time establishing, you know, what we call a success profile. And a success profile doesn't just look at the behaviours, it also looks at the underlying attitudes, and it's a predictor of, it's a little hard to explain, predictor of whether people are going to be successful at the next role, at the next level. So the framework's been very, very helpful in guiding those success profiles, and obviously we use 360s based on that. So so there's a couple of the tools, but yes, we work with a provider specifically on that.
Okay, well I'm going to slip one more question in before we actually move on. So the question here is about, you've got your leadership framework. You said that you originally did have a behavioural framework as well, but are you using that leadership framework? Is that moving down to every level within the organisation? So has it got that capacity? And I think it does with the levels that you've built in, but it, you know, maybe a little bit more on that for us.
So the leadership framework, which is our behavioural framework, just to clarify, goes for all employees. And so that is part of our performance management process for all employees. So we don't use a system for all employees. So, for example, the bus driver, we don't get him to come in and sit down and, you know, use the system. So we use a paper-based format. But at the lower levels, they often don't have KPIs. So, you know, basically they turn up and they, you know, drive the bus, or they turn up and, you know, check from a security point of view. We have people doing that. And so they're actually we only use the behavioural framework for some of the lower levels. So, you know, it's really important for that. And then it reinforces that this is important to our business, these are the behaviours we expect you to display. You've got to demonstrate how you're doing that in your role.
Okay, so it is forming part of your performance framework as well as your actual, just how you work every day, guys, which is great. That's what I think you want, is that it doesn't become a shock to people in the performance process. Hey, I didn't know that that's how you wanted me to behave.
And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, to be honest. You know, people, as much as I'd like to say it was, you know, a fantastic rollout or people have been really engaged with the process, it's only when you start to come down to the performance management people go, oh, okay, this is important. So if you've got a framework and you don't have it in your performance management, then the chances that it will be successful, I think, are severely limited.
Well, Rayleigh, thank you so much. We've still got some other questions there, but as I mentioned at the very beginning, everybody, we will get back to you if we didn't get a chance to get to your questions specifically. Sometimes we answer them when we're answering other questions there, so maybe that's happened. So to close us off today, just a couple of points here from Burson. So I normally start these webinars with all this research to support, but I think what I'd love to do with this one is more, hey, what Rayleigh and the team at Oil Search have actually done is actually reflective of organisations like what Burson are telling us to do. So we know that organisations that put in things like leadership frameworks are 4 times more likely to have a high performance driven culture. So we'll look forward to seeing you continuing your success as an organisation. As you said, it's been quite successful in the past, and now you've got a framework to help continue that. And we know that they also outperform the competitors. And you mentioned that at the very beginning, that you're in that top quartile in performance from a stockholder's position. So, you know, this is fantastic. So, a great big thank you to you, Rayleigh, and for Oil Search for sharing all of your insights today, some of your IP. Thank you for showing us the actual framework that you did come up with, and all the best with putting it in place for the future as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, as I did mention, everybody, we have recorded today's session, so within the next 2 working days you will receive an email from us, and then you can utilise that yourself or share the recording with others. And if we did not get to your question, we will get back to you post. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.